Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure, bonus material, The Dad Files. In looking for material to read, I found an old folder that contains every article that I ever wrote about being a dad. From the very first time we knew we were having a baby, all the way through the adult life of my daughter and now her own children. Oh, I always get letters from people who say, hey, when you preach, you talk about your children too much. Well, being a dad is one of the most awesome responsibilities and one of the greatest adventures I've ever had. I hope you'll enjoy The Dad Files. Where can you find helping, healing, and humor all in one place? Well, hang out with Ben and Travis on the Ben and Travis podcast. Ben and Travis on their podcast strive to normalize the discussion about mental health among Christians and help people with their struggles and broaden their horizons. Their special guests are always educational and entertaining. I love these two gentlemen, and you will too. Hang out with Ben and Travis on the Helping Healing Humor podcast, benandtravis.com. You'll also notice they have a bat logo. For those of you who don't pick up on that, Ben starts with a B, Travis starts with a T, and starts with an A. Ben and Travis, the bat symbol. Ben and Travis podcast, Helping Healing Humor, is a sponsor of the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure and the Dad Files. Diapers. Yeah, picture that classic guy in a television commercial. He's in the supermarket. He's standing in the middle of the aisle. His hair's messed up. He's unshaven. He's in his pajamas. He has no idea where he's at. He's been sent to buy diapers. Yeah. The first time you buy diapers can be really interesting. The first time I bought them, it was not only interesting, but it was challenging. I was sent to get small diapers. First of all, I was not prepared for them to come in the same size as a block of ice. Secondly, I didn't know they were color-coded. Thirdly, I had no idea whether to get baby Muppets or is it Muppet Babies balloons or the standard print. I really had in mind something with a toxic waste or hazardous waste symbol on them, or maybe something with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. By the time I got out of there, I would have settled for gangrene geriatric jujitsu gerbils. But there on the shelf were the Huggies small super trim diapers. Now, you may not see this as a problem, but I had trouble figuring out what the operative word was. If Huggies is the medium size, am I looking for squeezies? Perhaps super trim describes the size. I don't know. So I'm looking for ultra trim, mega trim, or just trim. Finally, I saw that it had a stress factor rating. It said in plain language for 8 to 12 pounds. My first attempt at buying diapers was a success. Have you ever been in an assembly and heard a speaker remark, "You all know the story of," and then you realize you haven't? You know, we take so much of our language sometimes, especially in worship and study, for granted that I'm afraid we leave others out or leave others behind without intending to. If you sit in a specific conversation, say with a financial advisor or somebody who underwrites mortgages, or you talk to a climber, or you listen to somebody who uses terms in a very specific industry, they assume you know what they're talking about and you don't. Is it fair to assume biblical literacy on the part of our audience, on the part of our guests, our visitors, or our friends? They enter a class and we sling around terms like inspiration, liberal, conservative, KJV, NIV, ASV, RSV, and we wonder why they don't RSVP when we invite them back. It's sort of like trying to buy new diapers and not knowing how to gauge the sizes. It's a very uncomfortable feeling to be in a group and be lost about what is going on. It's essential that we take the time with our guests, our visitors, and our friends and ask them if they understood what we did, if they understood what we said when they accompany us to worship. Now, you may be thinking that this is so obvious that it shouldn't even be talked about. Well, let's change the word guest. Let's change the word visitor to children? Are we explaining those very basic, important concepts to our children? Do we know why we come to the building? Are we going to church or are we going to worship? Are we using worship as a noun or a verb? It might be very important to explain this. See, if we take for granted that they know this, then they just take all this for granted. On one of our expeditions to Walmart, I became separated from our party. Actually, our party ventured into a dense section of women's clothing, such that I refused to proceed any further. I sought refuge in a more genteel part of the store, known as the sporting goods. Have you ever read the back of a plastic worm cover? I think not. It's pretty boring. Anyway, I was killing time back there, and I realized that enough time had passed that I became fearful that my family had either been abducted by terrorists or I was going to be charged with vagrancy. So I ventured forth into the store. My search for my family ended when I heard the cries of my daughter. The cries led me between two aisles that I did not know existed. Large tears streaked down her face. She was huffing and she was crying and she was sniffling. When she saw me, she reached out for me. I pulled her from the buggy. It was then that I noticed two brand new earrings and two newly pierced ears. She snuffled and said, "Daddy, that lady speared my ears with that shotgun." Now, I don't know much about piercings and I don't know much about earrings, but I definitely know that they do not spear your ears with shotguns. My daughter at that age would argue the case differently. Reality, after all, is the world of the perceiver. Have you ever heard anybody talking about somebody that you knew or maybe visiting a congregation and later reporting that they were rude or cold or unfriendly? This can be quite a shock, especially if you know the congregation to be different, if you know the person to be different. This can be an even a bigger shock if the congregation they're talking about is the one that you go to. We know we're friendly. We have good friends. We have good times. We share in each other's fears, failures, and faith. We are a family. How can anybody say otherwise? We know our Bible classes and where they are. We know where our fellowship hall is. We know where our friends are. It's very easy to be as friendly as we know how to be, and yet still leave somebody else with the impression that we are not a very friendly bunch. Everyone knows that they don't spear ears with shotguns. But ask a 2-year-old who has just had her first stinging experience, and they may judge otherwise. Friendliness is sort of like having your ears speared. It really doesn't matter how you feel about doing it or giving it. What really matters is how it feels to the person receiving it. 20 years ago, I was invited to be a guest at a special conference called Challenge Youth Conference. It's better known to most people as CYC. I've been a guest speaker there for the last 20 years and been privileged to work with their board. It's an annual event. It takes place in Dallas on Martin Luther King weekend, and it takes place in Pigeon Forge at the LeConte Center on the last weekend in February. This year, 2022, it will be January 14 through 16 at the Dallas Marriott in Las Colinas, Texas. It will happen February 25 through 27 at Pigeon Forge in the LeConte Center. The theme for 2022 is for me. From the beginning, God had a plan for you and for me. The different topics will be creation for me, redemption for me, and heaven for me. Some of your favorite teachers, along with Ben and Travis, and the Skits with a Truth guys, the SWAT team, will guide you through this spiritually equipping weekend. CYC is a sponsor of Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. You may find out more information, 3 W's and a dot, cyconline.com, www.cyconline.com. I gave my dog away today. It's the big dog that you may have heard me talk about. Several years ago, a friend of mine was breeding these dogs, and he offered one of the pups to me. My understanding is that it's a mixture between a German Shepherd and a wolf breed. This guy told me it was part of what was known as a red timber wolf or a Mackenzie timber wolf. I'm not sure that that was accurate, but this was a huge dog. Very, very unusually large for a German Shepherd. I named him Mackenzie, and we called him Big Mac. I have to admit, I'm sad about giving him away. I always felt like giving a dog to somebody else was a bit like betraying them. In this case, I gave him back to the people who originally gave him to me. They lost the mother and the father, and I had the only dog left from the litter. My dad used to have a dog named Buck. We were really, really little, a big collie, and when we would pull up to the house, because he stayed at my grandmother's house after Dad and Mom got married, Buck would come out and run and frolic, but he was super trained. Dad could ask him to sit or lie down. He was a good squirrel dog. Buck was like one of those amazing dogs you see on TV. He could do everything. I've always wanted a dog like that. I've always wanted a dog as good as Buck, but I've never had one. My brother always made fun of the dogs I had. He said they were all been clueless. We've had family dogs, and they were okay. My dad did most of the work with them. That is to say, he trained them. I usually ended up being the guy who fed them. I've never had a dog that was just mine who did very well. I don't know if it's I have a low frustration tolerance, or I'm too compassionate, or I'm impatient. I really don't know why I'm not a good dog trainer. At the departure of Mackenzie, I have to admit, I'm just not good with dogs. Big Mac had great potential. He was leash trained. He would also play tag with a soccer ball. My lifestyle, my ministry, I really couldn't or maybe wouldn't spend the time with him I needed to spend to turn him into the kind of dog that Buck was. And it's hard for me to admit that I'm not good in this area. Yet Mac and I were good friends. He was a good listener. He was big and he was rough. I loved to wrestle with him and roughhouse. And I kept thinking that I would start spending more time with him later. I finally had to admit that I wasn't going to get any better. My schedule wasn't going to get any lighter. And I wasn't very good as a dog trainer. The final decision came with the arrival of Lonnie Beth. As you may have guessed, the time that I could have spent with Mackenzie, I was now spending with my new daughter. And as she gets older, I want to spend more and more time with her. I'm very willing to be a poor dog trainer. I'm actually willing to be a non-dog owner. I am not willing to sacrifice my time with Lonnie Beth to do other things. I don't think you can be a great father and a great dog trainer. I think you can be a good father and a great dog trainer. I think you can be a great father and a good dog trainer. After all, everything you say yes to is something else you say no to. One or the other has to go. I don't really think you can be a great parent and be a great anything. I think you have to choose which area you want to be best at. And it needs to be a conscious decision. It's not something you just let happen. We have to choose whether we're going to be career people or family people. We have to decide if we're going to be committed to family or other things. I can settle for being an average whatever, as long as the price I pay for it is if I end up being a great father. I walked into the office the other day wearing black pants, a black long sleeve shirt, and I was wearing the black Reeboks I got for Christmas. With my close cut red beard, I looked like a World War II commando. I spent the early part of the morning walking around whistling the theme from that war movie where the prisoners build the bridge and then the other guys blow it up. Why the all black? Well, my ensemble happens to be the only thing in the house that doesn't show grape juice stains. Yes, it is the invasion of the 2-year-old, and she is using a grape juice ray. My daughter is exceptionally well coordinated. She's well balanced. This kid can pull out of a bad fall and roll to safety. She can walk an 8-foot long, 3-inch wide bar and not fall off. But for all of her coordination and all her physical progress, all the dexterity that she inherited from her mom, if you put grape juice in her hands, you have a toxic spill in your future. Coke is careful. Milk is manageable. OJ is okay. But grape juice is a surefire catastrophe. She has this adorable stuffed dog that my brother gave her. She's not allowed to play with it while there's grape juice on the loose. She and Jackie had matching white sweatsuits with Mother Goose stuff on them. Jackie's doesn't match anymore. We have light brown carpet. We were discussing having it dyed a darker shade. We've decided to go with purple for obvious aesthetic reasons. Daddy, I want some grape juice. Honey, why don't you drink some water? But I want grape juice, Daddy. It's too cold to go outside. You can't have grape juice. I know if she gets near it, she will wear the stains for a while. Now, she doesn't understand that those stains will stay for a long, long time. She doesn't understand that sometimes those stains won't ever go away. God is our Father. We are His children. And sin is like grape juice in the hands of a 2-year-old. We seem to get in it everywhere we go. For some reason, we are drawn to it. And although we are careful, it seems we always end up stained. God has asked us to be more careful. He has even forbidden us to get near it. Yet, we toddle through life, often oblivious to the real damage we do when we have a spill. We don't really even understand how those stains look in the eyes of God. It would be bad enough if our grape juice stains were self-contained, but all too often, we get it all over innocent bystanders. Then they suffer because of our carelessness. The good news is, 2-year-olds will grow up. In the meantime, they sell white grape juice at Bruno's. The other good news is that God knew about the stain problem before we ever started messing things up. And God has a pretty awesome stain remover. I find it very interesting as I write this story. I find it very neat that the blood of Christ is represented by grape juice. I'm so new at parenting. I'm so new at parenthood. I don't know if I'm doing this right or not. This morning, my little girl got up around 3. She'd been trying to adjust to life without a pacifier. I cradled her in my arms. I bundled up her snuggly diaper. I carried her into her room and tucked her back into the bed. Juice was her next attempt at staying up. We drank some purple stuff out of the fridge. I hope it was juice. We got all tucked back into bed. She has several more tricks to try to keep me up longer with her, but we won't talk about them. Finally, after more juice and a couple of trips to the bathroom, she was curled up in the little ball and ready for sleep. Bed, Daddy. Yes, Daddy's going back to bed. Bed, Daddy. Oh, do you want Daddy to sleep in here? A smile, 2 very deliberate nods of that little head. I laid down on top of the covers, and we went to sleep. The sun had just peeped through the curtains, and she began to stir. Her little fat legs pushed the covers back. She stretched out her little arms to each side. Her blue eyes peeped through tiny slits. And that sleepy little way that children utter their first words in the morning, she said, "Cshoc-o-let." It is clear that the most important thing on her mind this morning is chocolate. She knows what is chocolate. She knows what is not chocolate. She would eat a slug if it were covered in chocolate. It's the same battle every morning. Cshoc-o-let. No chocolate until you eat your breakfast. These are not necessarily my rules. They are Jackie's. Even though she doesn't get chocolate every morning, she asks for it. Even though she has to eat breakfast, the first thing she asks for is chocolate. It doesn't matter what unpleasantness she must encounter. First, she has to have her chocolate. She wakes up and the first thing her mind is centered on is chocolate. What is your mind centered on when you wake up? Is it your daily jobs? Is it worries? Is it hassles? Are you anxious? Wouldn't it be nice to wake up every day with an innocent expectation of our favorite simple pleasure? Why is it that those other things seem to assault us so early in the morning, first thing? I wonder why we can't see through all the stuff and look toward Jesus. No matter the job, no matter the sickness, no matter the hassle, no matter the burden, how would our days be if our first thought every morning was Jesus?